Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. In his wake comes the great reshuffling of the world. As the Atlantic becomes a highway, all manner of things will bridge the gap between the old world and new. Some will bring death in days, others will build empires across centuries. This is the Columbian Exchange, and this is its story. Hello and welcome to the Historical Humans Podcast. My name is Justin Woods, and I'm joined today by my fellow co-host, Coleman. And today, we are talking about one of the greatest trade networks since the Silk Road. However, there is a distinction that I think we should make, first and foremost, that this is talking about the Columbian Exchange, the earliest portion of the transatlantic trade. We dive into it briefly, but we don't go headfirst into the human side of things very often.
Yep. Oh, yeah, for sure. We are going to be keeping the triangle trade out of this a little bit, as that is a much more formalized later period. We are just going to be talking about the Columbian Exchange, which is also evil.
Oh, yeah, no, none of this is good. There's a lot of death, a lot of destruction, which is exactly why a history podcast wants to talk about it.
Yep. Welcome to Dark History. This is October. If you're wondering why we're doing this to you, it's because it's October.
This took years, months and years of us having to just lobby with the research department because...
don't go that road. Don't go down. Listen. This here is one of the few times we are doing a concept, and that's going to make things uniquely interesting to do and very strange to make interesting. And I, for one, was uniquely disappointed when the report came back and it said that the Columbian Exchange is not, in fact, a fun name for a criminal organization.
Yeah, it is unfortunately not a criminal organization, but it is one of the largest biological exchanges in history where people would exchange pretty much everything from people, products, resources, ideas, disease. Hell, they even brought the worst of the worst over, the Italians.
Don't besmirch my people. I will fight you.
For the record, if you're not aware, Christopher Columbus, or Cristobal Colon, flew under the Spanish flag, but he was an Italian by nationality and by birth.
Yep. It turns out a bunch of warring city-states can't exactly fund a multi-million-dollar expedition to the edge of the earth.
Which, to be fair, also was the Italians did produce some of the best sailors at that time. Effectively, Spain built out a lot of their military, their naval power, by hiring Italians.
Yep. Because you can't get British.
No, the British gained prominence actually later on. They're kind of a slow developer to this game. At first, it's really just the Spaniards and the Portuguese duking it out with the Dutch, kind of working in the fringes. The Dutch I think they strike strong and fast, though.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is kind of in an era of history where the sort of more Atlantic-facing mainland European nations are all looking for new ways to make money, because they've all, in some fashion, made an enemy of the Muslim states of North Africa and the Middle East. And so they're trying to not have to trade with them to get luxury goods. And that's where hiring Chris Columbus comes in.
You're also missing out on the most important part, is not only were they warring with the Asian states, they were warring with the Eastern European states, but they were also warring with European states. This came in the height of the 14th century, when there were so many conflicts going on. I mean, you've got the 100 Years' War. You've got the 30 Years' War. There was so much war.
If you wonder why France and any of the Germanic states are not involved in this, that's why. They do jump in later when they make the triangle trade out of it, because organized evil is apparently their thing, whereas this chaotic evil shit, we're gonna leave that to the Iberians.
Yeah, the Iberians were just like, all right, fuck that noise. We're going this way. I don't care if I sail off the face of the planet. I just need to get away.
Yeah. So the period of this that's known as the Columbian Exchange starts with Christopher Columbus giving his name to it when he sets out in 1492. And it ends about the year 1600, where there's a major power shift into how things are done, what's being done, and who's doing it.
Ah, that's when the British
Namely,
get involved. God damn it.
yeah, namely the British and the French start pushing out the Dutch, the Spanish, and the Portuguese, and they get this sort of exchange down to a science. What we're dealing with here today is the initial sort of house swap, reconnecting Europe and Africa with the Americas after several million years apart. And oh boy, is it a doozy. It's one of those things where, like, when it's happening, it's the apocalypse. At least for the Americans. For
Well,
the Europeans, it's a gold mine.
it's interesting too because you have these two independent cells of human history, and the wildest part is this was the case for thousands of years, but it will never be the case again. But they were so independent that there were no common language trees, there were no commonalities culturally between these groups, but beyond just like happenstance, and it led to this exchange. And there's some funny artifacts of the exchange. One of my personal favorites is one of the big trade items that the British and French would use and the Spanish started were just like metal potware, and the indigenous would just melt it down and use the metal.
Yep. Oh yeah, and like the Spanish were the same way with gold. They would receive carved gold objects. And they'd melt it down to make coins. You know, like neither side valued each other's craftsmanship. They just wanted the material, which is hilarious
I guess
when you
maybe we
think
aren't
about it.
that different after all when you
Yeah,
break it down.
yeah. One of the fun things is the term Columbian Exchange. It's actually a modern term. It wasn't in use until 1972 when a historian by the name of Alfred W. Crosby, who was a professor of history at the University of Texas in Austin, decided he was going to write a book to try and explain just what the hell happened in the wake of Christopher Columbus just running aground in Haiti and declaring it India.
Well, and that is actually a fair point to research because we know that colonialism happened. We knew that there was the genocide of indigenous peoples, but what really happened in that interim period? And this is exactly it.
Yeah, so we're going to actually be using his sort of internal divisions for how this went down. Crosby divided the exchange into three not entirely equal parts: disease, animals, and then plants. And each one kind of shows a different relationship between the Europeans coming over on the boats and the indigenous peoples. And the first one, diseases, is uniquely horrible and incredibly one-sided. It is, and there's actually a really horrifyingly almost benevolent reason for this,
I
or
know
benign.
exactly what you're getting at, and it is hilarious when you hear it. It makes sense long term, but when you hear it, your mind just goes to one thing.
So, so the key to this exchange is that European and African diseases have no counterpart in the Americas. So the Americas get the worst of the diseases coming in. They get the most virulent, most deadly diseases from which their population has zero immunity because they didn't have a lot of animal husbandry. The types of animals that they had to work with in North and South America didn't exactly carry a lot of virulent diseases that could hop into humans. Whereas the Europeans brought pigs and cows,
The Europeans sure did love their animal diseases.
which brings with them measles, smallpox, influenza, mumps, typhus, whooping cough, malaria and yellow fever. None of these exist in the Americas
But we
because
got them
none of these
back.
have an animal that can contage them.
But we got them back with two diseases that arguably have just as strong of an impact with tuberculosis and syphilis, because syphilis raided any seafarer for the next like 400 years until they just discovered that citrus helps.
Yep. Until you realize you had to actually eat the spicy fruit.
The orange is too spicy.
Look at a British breakfast and tell me a glass of orange juice wouldn't kill a pilgrim.
You're right, but still. Plus, tuberculosis still impacts a lot of populations to this day.
Yep. Oh yeah, for sure. But the lethality
Oh, smallpox
of
was a bitch.
of these diseases, particularly the ones coming in from the European and African side, they wiped out, and there's no exact count on this because there's no census for all the little tribes and various indigenous communities that are moving around and getting wiped out by this disease. They wiped out between 50 and 95% of the populations they came into contact with.
The rough estimation is I think there were like 200 million natives in North and South America, and within 100 years of 100 or 200 years of Columbus landing, it was less than 20 million. Like the drop off is truly
Yeah,
horrifying.
they lose at minimum half their entire population.
It's
For
realistically
comparison,
like 90%.
yeah, yeah. For comparison, the world's most recent pandemic at the time of this recording killed 0.1% of the populations it came in contact with. So this was magnitudes of just 500-fold worse than the global pandemic that shut everything down just a few years ago.
Oh, the one
Like,
that wasn't real?
yeah. Yes, Justin. Please go please go back to your internet forums. Back to the internet forums. This is what happens when you feed the trolls, people.
Yeah, no. So, yeah, it's a great comparison using, and the fact that we had such a recent pandemic is
Yeah.
truly, it helps put things into perspective because before COVID-19, the most recent was the Spanish 100 years ago.
Yeah. And so like, you know, a lot of us have that like, that real feeling and that real witnessing of society shut down and panic and become like accusatory and hostile to everything and itself. This was 500 times more deadly than that. So you can imagine the pandemonium just sweeping through the Americas as a result of this exchange over literally just the course of a century, just annihilatory.
Um,
This is
it's
an extinction level event.
it is, and it's fascinating too because one of the other things that really plays a role that people tend to misunderstand or misrepresent is the fact that a lot of the diseases that the Europeans brought over were easily transmissible. So a lot of these diseases would arrive in coastal towns and would sweep through the populations to the point where it would almost predicate the European advancement into those areas.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of European exploration during the Columbian Exchange comes upon abandoned villages, abandoned towns, mass graves, and the Europeans just are kind of a little bit clueless as to what happened. They don't really fully comprehend at first what's going on. And then when they do, being hyper ambitious colonial empires, they try to seize it as an opportunity.
It's really depressing when you read some of the early explorers' journals because they're like, "We've wandered upon the great ruins of or the ruins of a once great empire. There are still some people living here, but the streets lay barren, they lay hollow. And instead of going, hey, what killed everyone? They're just like, these are the remnants of a once great society, and they use that to make the people out to be savages or make them out to be less than
Yeah.
European, because how could their society collapse?
Yeah, they basically accuse the survivors of being squatters and then claim then they feel they have a claim to the land because we're not defeating a rival nation or exterminating a people. We're pushing out squatters. That's a good thing. It's not, but that's how they're framing it. And
I mean,
by they catch on uh after a little while because during the 7 Years War, aka the French and Indian War, um the North American colonies under Great Britain are distributing smallpox-ridden blankets intentionally to
so
indigenous tribes.
so that actually, unfortunately, is a myth. It's not
Oh,
actual fact. I know what
oh,
happened.
that's such a that was such an exciting fact too. I know. I hate when that gets in there. I
Yeah,
hate when that gets in because you hear these things so often. You just find them to be true.
but unfortunately, there is actually a case study for that where a group of Native Americans raided a fortification where people were being treated with smallpox, and during the course of them raiding the fort, the doors to the infirmary were left open. So they would go through and they'd grab blankets, hides, other things that would be necessities during winter. So that's where the story of the smallpox blankets really comes into fruition.
Yeah,
But
it's
effectively, though, smallpox blankets aren't too far off of what really occurred. And either way, smallpox was a disastrous disease to many Native American populations.
no
Sorry,
things.
I don't mean to
Yeah,
kill your fact.
no, it's all fun. It's all fun. No, it's just it's important to do that when it's wrong. It's important to do that's wrong because that's one of the things that will come up. That's something that would inevitably come up in a comment section or just be linked to this in a train of thought if it didn't come up and get debunked. That's a good thing. And speaking of things being good, or at least slightly better and not universally horrible for the Native Americans, um, the animal part of the exchange actually sees some benefits for North America. It actually it revolutionizes a lot of lifestyles, and it actually helps certain native groups become very much empire builders in their own way. Um, because what the indigenous people are able to do when the Europeans start bringing things over is they're very quick to see that there's benefits to a lot of these animals and to having them around. So they're very quick to just sort of capture escaped livestock, if you know what I mean.
It just so
Um,
happens to be liberating. You know, what kind
mhm.
of person would tie up this horse to a tree? That's just cruel and
Yeah,
unusual.
yeah. And like Europe brings over uniquely useful animals. You have horses, pigs, cattle, goats, chicken, oxen, sheep. So you have all these new sources of hide and wool and meat, all of which are in high freaking demand throughout North America. And a lot of the tribes are very quick to latch onto this as a means of improving their lives. The Navajo, in particular, become shepherds. They see sheep and decide it's the best thing since sliced bread, which doesn't exist yet. Uh,
Yeah, it's the best
and they,
thing since Thok invented bread.
yeah, it's the best thing before sliced bread, and they take it, and they become these shepherds, and you know it helps them a lot. They take that and they're able to improve their lives.
Okay,
But
but sheeps are cool. But but the Sioux and Comanche, they just take horses and they ride away with it.
yeah,
It was one of the best examples of a Native American population taking a European animal and quite literally just adapting it, because the Comanche and the Sioux live in the high plains where you could go hundreds and hundreds, or if not thousands of miles and not see anything of importance.
Yep. Yeah. And the Sioux and Comanche and a lot of the other Great Plains Indians take these horses and they're able to master them in terms of both hunting and warfare. So they're able to find food, keep up with food, and bring it back a lot more quickly and efficiently. And they're also able to do a lot more surprise raiding, a lot better. They get lightning warfare going. They become a lot more deadly, a lot more dangerous, and they become empire builders. This is what makes even some other tribes we haven't mentioned, like the Lakota, extremely powerful. The United States military will fear these people up to the turn of the 20th century as a legitimate military threat because of the horses.
The other thing that I think is also very interesting that I don't think we mentioned yet is we also sent animals back to Europe, which is fascinating because we send back turkey, we send back alpacas, which you want to talk about useful animals. The fact that alpacas and llamas you're able to harvest for fur and for food, like that was a big hit.
Oh yeah, no. They're they're high altitude, low maintenance, and you can both eat and shave them. They're
But
like giant sheep.
But on the flip side, the Europeans also discovered a couple of other semi aquatic animals up north in beaver, otter, in mink, and those just absolutely took off in high European fashion. Wearing these exquisite furs became the top thing you could do and became a quite literal gold mine for many a people.
Yeah, by the time the French and the Russians get in here, they are going for the fur as like that's all they want.
But then they also came across the North American buffalo,
Oh yeah,
and they're just
which
like, I can't believe this is such a big animal.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, for sure. That doesn't really get exported too much.
Just
It
hunted to
does.
death, that's all.
It gets during the America's Industrial Revolution. Uh, it gets in the way of the trains so often that the train companies just start slaughtering them, and it is just one of the most systematic acts of animal cruelty in human history.
Yeah.
Um, on
But
a slightly more fun note,
mhm.
some of the things the Europeans bring over um, cause some pretty hilarious problems for the Americas, as pigs and goats prove impossible to contain. And what ends up happening is they actually end up recreating a part of European society in America among the indigenous tribes. Because prior to these pigs and goats, farmers and shepherds didn't really hate each other because the animals that the shepherd would be herding wouldn't really be doing too much that would destroy the farmer's crops if they happened to go in and they didn't really have a lot of interest in going through the farmer's lands. With pigs and goats, that's not the case because those fuckers eat everything. So they will just start destroying farmlands. And this creates a lot of internal tensions between societies that went for farming and societies that went for herding. And you can bet your bottom dollar that the Europeans started exploiting this because they understood that problem and started using it to start pitting various tribe factions against each other in order to get an inroad.
So I can tell you another fun fact about those pigs.
Yep.
We still have issues with those pigs.
Oh, we always have issues with the pigs. They're fucking
Because
pigs.
these pigs that managed to escape ended up becoming feral hogs. And when you go down into the southern portion of the United States, they have so many issues with feral hogs that there's oftentimes a bounty on how many you can kill, and that they would pay you to kill, to cull. Because these
Yep.
populations, like you said, will trample crops, they'll kill dogs and other animals they come across. Like they are vicious. They will gore you in an instant if you get close to them.
Yep. Yep.
So
It's like
there's still
everybody's saying them.
hound hunters or hog hunters out there.
Yeah.
it just funny, but the Europeans also brought with them a lot of invasive species that tended to destroy the local ecosystem as well. So not only did they commit a mass genocide on a lot of the populations, inadvertently and overtly, but they also ended up wiping out a lot of native flora as well.
Yep. Yep. And that is, like the, like, remember when we said like animals is going to be going better for the Americas? Remember, better is improving on the literal apocalypse because this has still got a lot of not good in it. And that does bring us to the third section, which is honestly going to be where the Europeans start taking from the New World a lot for this exchange. And it's going to be plants. Because, oh boy, does Europe need reliable foodstuffs? And America has so many to offer.
Actually, a lot of foods that a lot of countries eat today originated here and originated at this point. Of the likes come corn, potato, sweet potatoes, cassava, tomatoes, peanuts, pumpkins, squash, tobacco, pineapple, peppers. And potato really gained its moment in the spotlight because corn is arguably one of the most popular, but potatoes became a staple crop of Ireland, would be the boon of its existence and also the downfall, unfortunately. Rest in peace.
Yep, yep. Potatoes store well in cold climates. That's why the Inca in Peru loved them.
Up in the mountains where they had thousands of different varieties. Now we just
Yep,
kind of think of one or two. We think of sweet potatoes or the russet potatoes, but
yep. And both the British Isles and Russia start implementing them as fast as they can because this is a high nutrient crop that can survive in their climates.
well, and
They
then
need this.
the Russians also quickly figured out that hey, you put yeast and sugar with these potatoes, you leave it for a few months, hey, you got vodka.
Yep. The Russians figured out how to ferment it because they're Russians.
It's
um,
amazing the
well,
Irish didn't.
yep. The Irish already had whiskey. They were working with corn.
Oh, no.
But one of the other big things is that potatoes, they grow beneath the ground. They're a tuber. So they can be harvested at any time. There isn't like with corn and wheat, where if you don't harvest them at their appropriate ripening time, they will rot and go fallow. They can't really be trampled. And Europe is in a state of constant war right now. So populations need a crop where they can evacuate in the wake of an army and come back in after the dust has settled.
You know, that's also a fair point because usually those marching armies would do one of two things to most fields. They'd either pillage it or they would burn it to the ground,
Yep.
depending on how full their bellies are that day.
Yep. Yep. This crop was so useful. It received personal endorsements from both Frederick the Great of Prussia and Catherine the Great of Russia. These are two of the most powerful military leaders of Europe at the time.
Okay, to be fair, Frederick had to do it because there was like this myth that potatoes were poisonous. So Frederick, to convince his population that this was a good idea, very publicly had a meal with I think it was like steamed potatoes.
Yep. Just yeah. But it's just hilarious that like what is effectively world leaders are endorsing a crop to their people because they need this to sustain their society that badly.
I
Then
also
think, oh, go for it.
I was just gonna say I love the artificial division in Europe too, as to whether you're a tomato or a potato European.
Oh God, yep, that was a whole thing because the tomatoes couldn't quite grow as far north, so that was kind of the dividing line. Colder the climate. Uh, Unfortunately for the potatoes, is over dependence on it in Europe caused the Irish potato famine. And this famine, fun fact, wasn't just in Ireland. That was where it was worst. That was where the people suffered the most and the most publicly. But the crop also failed and caused famines in Scotland, in Belgium, in the Netherlands. Just it the Western European locations that were farming the potato all got wiped.
Do you know why Ireland got hit extra bad by the famine?
Intentional mismanagement from Parliament due to the politicization of the issue on a ballot.
Yeah,
That's right. You denied the existence of the famine if you belong to a certain political party.
the
No one in modern times would do that.
well, and also on top of that, the British intentionally were sending the good potatoes back to England so they could have them and eat them. And then the Irish they just left to starve because the way a lot of those landlords would work, or those liege lords, is you would work an allotment for the local lord. And then the
Yep.
local lord would take 95% of the crop and you keep 5%. Well, when the whole field rots, goes fallow, or you only get like 5% of the total crop yield, well, then it tends to be more of an issue.
Yeah. You paid rent in terms of crops, percentage share of your harvest. And if your harvest was consistently small, you got evicted in favor of someone who could do it better. The big problem with this system is that when crops start failing consistently over a large area, there is no food left in the area, even though it is a food growing area.
Yeah, so it just left a lot of people starving because they weren't able to grow food that they relied on.
Yeah. And just, you see a lot of like after effects of this exchange going on throughout Europe and the Americas. And it's always bad news for some reason. It's always bad news for somebody. I mean, for crying out loud, horses made the Sioux an empire. They're the Sioux. They are the angriest Native American tribe of their time.
Well, that's also because they dealt a lot with encroachment and saw the bloodied battles that their contemporaries faced further east, so they knew it was a fight for survival.
Oh yeah, the Sioux understood it was an all or nothing battle, and they were good at all or nothing.
When you back a starving dog to a corner, they're going to bite back.
Yeah,
It
they
is
really.
interesting though just how much these foods really happen, and then corn was arguably the biggest boon of them all to all of the old world, and it basically helped prevent famine in Eurasia after 1700. It takes 100 years after the exchange ends to fully implement, but it grew in a lot of places other crops couldn't.
Yep. And the best part of corn is the fact that it is a versatile crop in the sense that you don't only feed your people or your livestock with it, you can feed both. So if you can grow enough of it, you can have one item that works for all the uh, all the organisms you need to keep alive, which was a major problem because you know you had to have two separate fields, one for growing the hay for the damn cows, and one for growing the food that you were actually going to eat because you don't have enough cows to eat cow every damn day.
Well, and one of the things that we don't talk about very often at this point, but a lot of research has actually gone towards, is the amount of calories produced per square acre. And effectively, corn is one of the best of any plant out there in terms of the amount of calories. I think the only one that really does better per acre is rice,
Mm-hmm.
but
Oh
rice
yeah,
is
right.
also exceptionally small.
Yeah, rice is kind of the king of efficiency.
But that's why you see it's able to support large populations very well with very little effort. And corn also has a relatively small growing and gestation period to the point where some areas were able to get three full harvests in a single calendar year.
Yeah, which is massive for your ability to feed a an expanding population. And one of the things too is corn is drought resistant, which meant that it could be used throughout Africa, where there was a lot of sort of rainfall insecurity. You either got flooded or you got nothing for a lot of years. And corn was really good at surviving the we got nothing years. So it gets implemented a lot. And it actually results in a centralization of power in Africa among the African states that aren't already dependent on Europeans. And it just does everything better than the traditional crops. It spoils less quickly than yams and bananas and millets. And this means you can stockpile more of it for longer periods of time. Dole it out as a political reward to your allies. Keep it for long trading missions, merchants and armies, things that have to go very far away to do shit for you.
Well, and even when you break it down very simply, you're able to stockpile it year after year. So you're realistically looking at a way to prevent yourself and make yourself more famine resistant just in general. You're not going to worry about this year's harvest nearly as much when you know you got half of last year's still chilling in the fridge.
Yep. Yeah, and during the 18th century, the Asante in what is now Ghana decided to forge an empire with it by stockpiling as much corn as they could and then using it as army rations. And they're able to build a pretty sizable and somewhat resilient empire out of this. So much so that the process gets copied by two neighboring kingdoms, the Dahomey and the Oyo, who both form smaller kingdoms using the same method as the Asante when they see how successful the Asante are off the bat doing this. And so it just, this exchange creates new forms of government, new kingdoms, new empires. It reshapes the world in Europe, in Africa, in the Americas. And it's not just a simple one-way conquest.
The downside to this, though, is this also basically paved the way that built up the slave trade. Because you have this mass consolidation of power, this subjugation of smaller powers, and that realistically was where a lot of the slave trade happened, was you would have these larger polities basically subjugating smaller populations and selling them off to the highest bidder.
Yep. Yeah. One of the key things with this is that in addition to being able to feed armies over long distances, it also meant that your raiding parties and your people merchants could go further from your home base where you were growing this food in order to forcibly acquire people to sell to the Europeans. It allowed for a much more extended network. It also allowed for more people to be held at once in the barracoons, which are these sort of coastal cages that were used for slave marketing, which meant you could sell a larger shipment of people at a time. So the corn really does make everything in Africa more centralized and more efficient, including the horrors. It builds a lot of kingdoms. And those kingdoms destroy a lot of other people.
But they say something about the corn-fed Midwestern men. But man, apparently corn feeds a lot of other people as well. It's good fighting food.
Yeah. Now, what's funny is like a game development patch, the Columbian Exchange also came with the counter strategy to the corn empire.
Gandhi?
With cassava.
Ooh.
See, cassava, like the potato, is a root plant. It can be harvested at any time after ripening, and it's not that easy to see. So a raiding army might miss it. Also, like corn, it stores for a long period of time once harvested, meaning you can leave your fields fallow, take your stockpile, and run, only to come back months later when the invaders have gone and harvest your new stockpile. And this allowed for a lot of hide and go seek with new empires in what is now Angola, Congo, and West Africa, where they would form this larger group with this centralized structure and then work together to get the fuck out of the way of the corn people whenever the corn people showed up. They had the warning system set up so that everyone could run when they saw the corn eaters coming. So it's kind of funny that like it provides both a horrible problem and a way to solve it. Now, the corn people, unfortunately, are going to be winning a lot more than the cassava people. Account of the fact that the cassava people just need to screw up once for the corn people to win.
Yeah. That is an interesting counterbalance to that, though.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, from Europe and Africa, arguably gave the New World some of the most power because Europe and Africa gave sugar and coffee, which they needed labor to grow these crops, which have greatly influenced the slave trade because they had these massive plantations. They effectively found like the golden patch to plant this stuff in better than any of the conditions they found elsewhere. I mean, almost all of Central and South America are like prime locations for these plants to grow, and Europe was just like, oh, coffee, you mean the go-go juice, and then sugar, oh, the
our addiction.
Yeah.
Of course, some point along the line, the Europeans growing sugar meet the people who have found the cocoa bean, and we get chocolate.
Oh, which great combo. And then you also get the people that make tobacco as well, which Europe's like trifecta. No wonder they were so mean in North America. They were just jonesing for their fixin' and had all these people getting in the way.
Yeah. And you really see with this sort of exchange how the triangle trade starts to set itself up, where you have these crops that the Europeans are dependent on being in ideal conditions to grow in the Americas, and Africa having this labor that the Europeans need to get a hold of in order to grow it effectively, because my God, are these crops low yield, labor intensive products?
Well, and then I think one of my favorite developments in this whole story, rice was also introduced as a plantation crop, and it becomes one of my favorites because it became central to Central and South American cuisine. I mean, have you ever had Mexican rice and beans? It is god tier.
Oh yeah, for sure. You got to mix them up though. Don't eat them separate. Mix them together. Be a monster. Do what I do. You can make some horrible things out of very good things. They are delicious.
I say we vote him off the island now.
They are delicious. They are delicious. Okay, you have a half and half scoop. A half the fork is rice, half the fork is beans. They're put on the plate side by side for a reason.
Oh, that's awful. But then Europe and Africa also sent over
just so much crap.
Wheat, rye, barley, watermelon, yam, millet, coffee, okra, banana, orange, lemon, grapes. It's really kind of this interesting thing where all the crops that did all right in Europe came to America and just proliferated.
Yeah. Florida became filled with oranges, and a lot of like the wheat and rye and barley did amazing in like Tennessee and northward. They did great in cold climates. They were fantastic in places where corn had a hard time growing because, fun fact, corn is killed by cold, not heat. So, it was this really interesting counterbalance where like they were able to fill in around the existing crop ecosystem to find places that were low quality and thus undervalued by the indigenous peoples where they could put their crops in and grow massive.
Well, and then also what really made matters better for the Europeans, but I think worse for the Native Americans, was the fact that so much of North and South America are arable. They fit really prime farm locations. I mean, you when you look at like Central America where the first Europeans settled, it was tropical rainforest. So it was hot, humid and wet. Something that plants in Europe really wanted and adored, they just didn't get a whole lot of.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Like I'm pretty sure the only places that aren't conducive to crop going in the Americas is like the desert of the American Southwest and anything that might be defined as the Northwest Passage in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, you have deserts in South America as well, that in the Sonoran Desert in Mexico.
Oh,
But yeah, generally speaking, there's a lot of really prime farmland in the area that really adore these plants. And then again, we're talking about calories produced per square acre. A lot of these foods could be grown in mass. The only limitation factor was the amount of people you have working on those plantations. And that is, like we said, how you see the development of the triangle trade. Because when you look at the plants that were plantation crops, the sugarcane, the rice, the tobacco, you needed mass manpower, including cotton. We haven't even mentioned cotton.
oh yeah, no. Cotton and the cotton gin. Like there's a fun little thing where in the United States between the Civil War and World War II, America's massive industrialization is crop based. It's all about figuring out ways to take these foods that we've brought in from Europe and the ones that were here in America during this exchange and growing as much of them over as much land as possible using as few humans as possible. And by the time you get to World War II, there are German POWs who go back to Germany, round up their families, and emigrate here because they see the existence of a tractor, which Germany didn't even have.
Well, and it's interesting too because you talk about how many calories one person could produce per year. The large farms are really going that route. And even in the modern day, farmers are still facing that same issue because they're struggling a lot with the mechanization of every aspect to the point where you only need one farmer to look after uh, hundreds of acres.
Yep. One farmer, six mechanics.
Yeah, basically, whereas it used to be 100 farmers that would work the same amount of land, granted, they had lower yields as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, and it's just one of those things that happens like it's very much like the long-term impacts of this go, into the triangle trade and beyond because this sort of is what sets up a lot of European, African, and American history to happen. Is a lot of it is driven by the social inequalities that come from these crop exchange, from the attempts to make things better and more efficient. And oh, dear God, it's the 1860s and there's still slaves.
Let's also talk about the fact that the Columbian Exchange is directly responsible for the reason why pirates were such a big deal.
Oh my God, yes,
Because
yes.
there was so much money just going back and forth across the Atlantic.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, one of the big things with pirates is, you know, they're targeting ships guessing what they have. And one of the biggest conundrums pirates have is when they take a slave ship because there's the debate of what to do. Can we man both ships and form a fleet? Can we just steal the cargo holds? Do we free these people and make them more pirates? What the hell do you do with this? Do we sell the ship to a rival power? It's one of the most interesting dynamics where Pirates of all people are struggling with questions of ethics and morality.
Do you know what the answer to that is? What they did more often than not?
Now, I do not know what the number one result is, but I'm sure it's horrible because these are criminals we're dealing with.
Actually, I think it's probably the best possible outcome.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they freed them and allowed them to become pirates with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
I do
basically
know
like, this is inhumane. We're not going to keep you slaves. Sometimes they would sell them, and they would sell them to
Yeah.
some non-favorable people. But a lot of the time, crews on pirate ships were in such high demand because there just wasn't all that many of them that they would basically say, yeah, if you want a job, you could join us. You'll get a chance at gold. And they were treated with more respect and could earn like a living and a name for themselves working on these ships.
Yeah. I know Blackbeard actually trashed his reputation when, as part of his deal, when the British put out an act that says, if you sign here and agree to stop piracy, we won't arrest you, like clemency.
Mm-hmm.
As part of his bargain that he made for that clemency, he agreed to return the like 3 dozen people on his crew that he had just liberated from a British slave ship to the British. And it was kind of seen as it was seen as a jerk move to quit, but understandable. But to quit in that manner really, really pissed off a lot of his former crewmates.
But that tells you exactly what a lot of them did was they'd have 3 dozen freedmen on their ship.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I just remember that story where it's it just kind of goes, it proves that Blackbeard was a uniquely terrible person.
Yeah, that's self-preservation above all else.
Yep. He goes back to piracy after he does that too, so it's not even like he got out. The man is a chronic bastard, and so much of what he does can actually be tied back to this exchange.
Well, yeah, because you have the sugar plantations that would end up producing rum, and we all know what pirates go after more than anything.
Rum, Spanish gold.
All slaves. Of that was happening here, yeah. I mean,
screwing over the French.
Who doesn't love that part? But there seriously was just so much happening at this time, and then the Europeans saw it as an open bag of wealth, and they saw all these goods. I mean, Spain became immensely wealthy to the point where they funded an army for the Reconquista, and that's half the reason they were able to afford to knock all the Moorish populations out of Spain, was they just had so much money pumping in that they just effectively bought the best soldiers they could. They trained them. They had professionals.
Well, and wasn't Chris Columbus's voyage to celebrate completing the Reconquista?
That might be part of it.
Yeah, because that from what I recall, Queen Isabella wanted to do something to celebrate the unification of Castile and Aragon and the pushing out of the Muslims from the Iberian Peninsula, and to kind of show the world that Spain was a big dog. Like, we're someone France should respect. We're someone Prussia should have a negotiation with. We're someone the Portuguese should look out for. And it was a big publicity stunt to sort of celebrate reunification.
You're right. The Reconquista ended on January 2nd, 1492. Maybe I'm thinking of the Inquisition that would start.
Yeah. I think you might be thinking of the Inquisition. I think you might also be thinking of a massive fleet that they send to Northern Ireland to try and take Ireland from the British. Because that was funded purely by Central American silver.
Yeah, the Inquisition was started in 1478, but then continued on for quite a few hundred years afterwards, 1834. So yeah, Spain used their wealth and really tried to flex their influence and their power. Portugal basically cashed in and out. I mean, they had Brazil for a few centuries until effectively a division in their own chain of command, their own royal lineage.
Yeah.
It is interesting, though, when you look at the impact of this, because so many of these items and products are so ingrained in modern day society that you wouldn't think twice. I mean, how many Italian dishes contain pasta, or how many Italian dishes contain a lot of these things, like the potatoes,
Tomatoes.
the tomatoes. Um,
Yeah, it's just one of the things. Like if you name a lot of these plants, a lot of these food products, the place you think of, they're not indigenous to. Hawaii, pineapples are not native. Oranges are not native to Florida. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. Potatoes do not belong in Ireland. According to evolution, they're not supposed to be there.
well, neither are the Irish, but you see how that worked out.
No, the Celtic, the Celtic invasion. The Celtic invasion was like 2,400 years ago. We're fine.
I just love it. Nobody
We're
hates the
fine.
Irish like the Irish. Uh,
Well, that's the Scottish.
the Irish too. You talk
It's the
about the
Scottish who
northern
hate
and the
each
southern.
other.
But seriously, when you look at this long term impact, I mean, even today with measles as making a comeback, smallpox has never fully gone away. These diseases really did impact the Native American populations and led to a mass decline. Whereas I genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that had disease not ravaged North American populations, we wouldn't have seen such a large colonialization. I do think there would have been a lot of warfare and bloodshed, absolutely.
Oh yeah, the history of colonialism in North and South America would have looked much more like it was in Africa, where it's constant warfare being what where technological superiority is slowly but surely winning out over indigenous numbers, as opposed to what happens in the Americas, which is just massacre and power vacuums.
Oh my god, and we brushed upon it, but we didn't even talk about all the rare goods that went the other way either.
Oh yes, yeah, that's one of the fun things too. Uh, Crosby does not talk about rare metals as being a part of the exchange. He focuses exclusively on the biological part of it, which is part of how it distinguishes from the triangle trade a little bit, which formalized later on. But yeah, part of this exchange, as far as we're concerned, should be the rare metals, silver and gold, coming out of the Americas to Spain and the Portuguese.
I mean, not even just that, but also when you look at copper, lead, a lot of things that led to the development of a lot of the weaponry that they would go
Yep,
on to use, their cannons, their guns, their
yep,
rifles.
yep. Yeah, the Europeans bring over steel, and they kind of discover batshit and make gunpowder.
I mean, gunpowder had already been around, it had been around for
Oh
thousands of
yeah,
years, but they found basically all the ingredients that they needed to. They found an
yep,
area that was so minerally wealthy
yep,
that anywhere they stuck a shovel in the ground, they came across something of value.
yeah. The real weakness of the Americas was, as mineral rich as it was, it didn't have a lot of good military type minerals. It didn't have a lot of iron and steel. It had a lot of wealthier minerals, and that makes it very attractive and very vulnerable to steel heavy nations.
Yeah, they didn't have the technological advancements that a lot of Europe did.
Yeah.
I would still say they had a lot of warfare because they were always
Oh,
warring tribes.
they had a lot of warfare. I'm saying they didn't have a lot of war minerals, where they were able to, where like they didn't have an abundance of iron to make swords and body armor out of, which is what kind of gives the Europeans the edge. You look at some of the early conquistador notes from this early on in the exchange, and I think Cortez, I believe, talks about how 15 men against like 500, and he wins because as they're beating on his men, the armor holds, and they're cutting through the wood and the cloth armor of the indigenous peoples.
So there's a funny story about that with the conquistadors in Mexico specifically,
Yeah.
because both sets of armor that the Spaniards would wear became a problem in their own unique way. So most of the foot soldiers just had cloth garments, and the Aztecs, one of their key weapons was obsidian blades embedded in a wooden pole. They basically made a mace out of this extremely sharp, volatile material, and it shredded through the wool and the cloth that the Spaniards had. Then the Spaniards would wear their metallic armor in the hot, humid jungles of Mexico.
Yep. Yeah. Where it was like the the metal armor was great for a pitched battle or for like in a city kind of fighting. But if you had no Cora. You had no a way to project your power beyond an urban center with it, because the second you stepped outside of a building, you were sweltering. So good luck going on a 3-day march.
God, that's just a nightmare. But I do think that's probably a good point for us to wrap up this here podcast. This is one of the first times we've done a generalized idea like the Columbian Exchange. So let us know if you'd like to see more episodes. I mean, we'll do one on the Triangle Trade next if you'd like.
Don't go into the darkness.
Yes.
We can barely skirt the edges of it here.
But I think that's a good point for us to wrap up today's episode. Thank you guys for watching. And on next week, we've got quite the interesting one coming up for you here, don't we?
Yeah. To celebrate our spooky season, we will be going into the spiritualist movement.
Ooh, spirituals. And we're coming up here on the end of season 4 already, which is incredible. We got 2 more episodes. We got the Rum Rebellion and the Condottieri Wars.
Yeah, that's 3 with the spiritualism.
Yeah, so be sure to tune in. We got a lot of good ones coming. And then season 5, I think, will be our best season yet, adding a little bit of hype there. Ooh.
Yes. I think season 5 is going to be one of the ones that has the strongest kickoff, thanks in large part to your support and in some small part to, I believe, the topics we've chosen to start off the next season. Should be very, very fun.
So be sure to tune in so you find out what those surprises are. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks with the next episode.